Hey, thanks for joining us this week on the Graco Process PumpCast. I'm Brendan Forrest, and today I'm joined with Jeff Schaefer. We're going to be talking about certifications within the food, beverage, personal care, and pharmaceutical industries. So Jeff, let's just jump right into it. So what certifications are required for the food and hygienic fluid transfer segments?
Yeah, nice to be with you again, Brendan. As far as certifications go, there's probably a long list, and we're probably going to be missing a few here, but we'll hit kind of the high runners, and we'll note that it's going to be different depending on region, right? Like each country sometimes may have their own requirements. Starting here in North America, the most widely known certification is FDA approval, right? So we want to make sure that anything that we put in our pumps or that is used to process food or personal care materials is safe, right, for consumption or for the body. There's also 3A approval, which is kind of dairy specific. There's an approval called USP Class VI, which is kind of targeted more towards the pharmaceutical industry. It's testing to make sure that the product or whatever is being used is kind of inert for the body or the bloodstream, right? In Europe, we have some very specific approvals called EHEDGE, which is kind of a cleaning approval. There's one called EC1935, or you can also see a glass and fork symbol. If you look at your plastic, like Tupperware containers, you'll see a glass and fork on the bottom of it. That's the European food safety approval, right, for EC1935. And then a big one that we've run into lately is material certifications, right? A lot of users in this space want to have traceable and documented material certifications, knowing that what we claim is in the pump is actually in the pump. We do all that per EN 3.1 standard.
So why in the food and beverage space is there a need for all these certifications, right? When you talk about industrial pumping, you know, we have a couple where it's explosion proof, electrical. So why is there all these extra certifications in food and beverage and personal care?
You mentioned explosion proof, which is also valid for this industry, right? If you're pumping solvents and stuff. The main reason is that in this industry, the end product is going to be ingested or get into the human body, right? When we talk about industrial stuff, like the paint you put on your walls or your car or the chemicals you may use, you're not going to drink it, eat it. You're not going to put it on your eyeliner or have a medical patch for like a nicotine thing and it's going to get in your bloodstream, right? So we want to make sure that whatever we're processing these products with is safe for the human body.
Mm-hmm. So what are the general steps for going through a certification process at the manufacturer level?
Great question. And it depends a little bit on what certification you're getting. In general, there are standards out there that we as a manufacturer purchase that kind of outline how the product must be manufactured. They outline what materials can be used for the products in that kind of space. We do our design work, and then we go back to a certification body with our equipment and our pumps, and we say, okay, here's our equipment. You guys test it, you guys look at it, and then you sign off that we kind of meet your standards as far as selling into this space, right? 3A would be one, for example. There's a 3A governing body. They have some rules and regulations that you need to meet in order to meet 3A standards, which is for the dairy industry, right? Like milk, yogurts, ice creams, that kind of stuff. We build our pump accordingly. We give them a pump. They kind of look at it, test it, make sure everything's good, and then they sign a document saying, yes, Graco, you meet 3A standards and your equipment can be sold into the space.
Got it. Okay, cool. All right, so we kind of gave a quick overview of like what certifications are out there. I would like to talk about specifically what those certifications are. So when we're talking about food and beverage pumping, not dairy, what are the primary certifications and what do they really certify us to do?
Well, the primary one's going to be FDA, right? And everybody's heard of FDA, right? The Food and Drug Administration. They're making sure that everything we do in that space is kind of safe. There is a list of materials out there that are deemed safe for food processing and food manufacturing. FDA, this one actually doesn't require an outside agency, right? We basically, as Graco, as a manufacturer, have good manufacturing practices, GMP practices, and we can take a look at the list and we kind of self-certify that, yes, everything that we put in our pumps meets the government's requirements for FDA standards, right? We send that certificate with every pump that we ship. For food, the European one we talked about, EC 1935, that one's a little bit more stringent. The glass and fork that we talked about, that is stamped on there to make sure that basically any of the materials the food comes in contact with doesn't leach into the food or the product, right, over time. So there are some what they call migration testing to make sure that any of harmful pieces or chemicals or anything like that don't go from the stainless steel or the plastic into the food product as it's being pumped. And then also we mentioned the material certifications, which are big for food and beverage or any sanitary industry, right? And that's basically a way for the customer to know that we as a manufacturer are actually giving them what we say we're giving them. So we will take a pump, we actually X-ray scan all the parts that are in it from a metal standpoint. We give them a certificate saying this is exactly what the components are and what you're getting, and we sign it and certify it to the serial number of the pump that they get. So on kind of the high-end food, personal care type stuff, that's a big one.
Okay. Is that X-ray scan done in-house, or does that go to a third party to have the scan done?
We have all that capability in-house for Graco, so we invest in equipment so we can do all that.
Awesome. So for dairy, obviously it's a little bit different, right? Different animal. So you kind of mentioned 3A. What is required to meet that 3A certification?
The requirement for 3A is that your pump's made of FDA components again, right? So we go back to that FDA component list. 3A requires, like for our pumps on the diaphragm pump side, we require a leak sensor behind the diaphragm because 3A wants to know if a component fails like that, we can notify the user and they can stop their process and make sure they clean out the pump and have anything addressed. And then also 3A looks a little bit at cleanability of manifolding and all that kind of stuff. And they want to make sure that your equipment's going to hold up to the cleaning processes in the 3A manufacturing area, right? Because they use a lot of high temp cleaning because dairy does grow bacteria and go bad very quickly, which is kind of what that comes from.
So the 3A is really designed around eliminating any sort of bacteria within those dairy products.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So earlier you'd mentioned USP Class VI for the personal care and pharmaceutical industry. Can you go into a little bit more in depth on what that is?
Yeah, and so when we look at some of these more stringent approvals like USP Class VI, not all of our elastomers apply. In USP Class VI, all of our Teflon diaphragms and balls and elastomers and everything are approved, but the other materials are not. And with USP Class VI, they're really doing a lot more work on making sure it's safe to go into the bloodstream. I've done a little bit of digging into this. One of the tests that they do for USP Class VI is they take a 1 inch by 1 inch square piece of the material and they insert it under the skin of a rabbit and make sure that there's no adverse effects, there's no swelling or any of that kind of stuff, right? That tells them that, hey, look, if a piece of this or a chunk of this gets into whatever it is that we're doing, Brendon, you're taking some sort of medicine or something like that, you're not going to get drastically sick or ill or anything like that based on that material, right? So
that is really interesting. Rabbit, huh?
Yeah, rabbit. And there's several different ways that they can test that. That's
Sure.
one of the ways that they can test it. But that was one of the more interesting ways.
So like we use a 316 stainless steel for our high sanitation pumps, correct? So so they'd basically take a 1 inch by 1 inch square of 316 stainless and then test that on animals to see if it has an effect on them.
No, not exactly. And the reason I say no is because stainless steel is kind of deemed an inert substance, right? So USP Class VI really applies to the elastomers. They want to make sure that the rubbers or the Teflon pieces that are going into this process are going to be good. For most of this processing equipment in the sanitary space, stainless steel is kind of widely deemed as acceptable and safe for that because rust, it doesn't corrode any of that stuff.
So it's really protecting against the diaphragms and the balls and seats for us in the diaphragm industry. Yeah, got it. Cool. So let's talk about, obviously whenever we talk sanitary, we want to talk about cleaning and cleaning in place is kind of some buzzwords in the industry. So what are the certifications that are really focusing on cleaning and how do you get certification for those?
The big one in the industry for cleaning is EHEDGE, which is out of Europe. And again, there's a test process, EHEDGE. We're going through this a little bit right now. They require that the pump is basically as clean as a sanitary pipe, right? So when you flush it through for a certain amount of time and they take everything open, they want to make sure there's no bacteria in there, right? So they're making sure that when you go from material to material, batch to batch, day to day, you're not going to have bacteria growth inside your pump or your piece of equipment that's going to cause harmful effects for anybody that's going to consume it, right? It's a difficult approval to obtain because they're pretty stringent on it. There's not really a tried and true CIP approval for North America, but we do some guidelines as far as, flush it according to the kind of this way and these temperatures and that kind of stuff to get everything clean. For the most part, though, we always recommend, and most customers will do this, if you are doing any type of CIP in cleaning, always do an in-house swab test to make sure that it meets your requirements. Because we have a manufacturer have a very limited view on what is required in each customer's facility. Their approvers and their inspectors and their processes are very different from place to place. And so it's important that they test whatever they're doing and make sure that it meets their internal standards. In the sanitary world, that's usually done by a swab test to verify there's no bacteria.
Cool. So talking about certifications outside of food and beverage that could apply into this industry for the sanitary and hygienic. So we did mention ATEX and CE. So when would we need to look at having those certifications? What applications in sanitary would we be looking at for those?
ATEX or hazardous location in North America is typically used in the personal care space. When you look at like perfumes and that kind of stuff, there's a lot of alcohols and solvents that go into there that create a hazardous location. Also, we talk about alcohols, right? Distilleries are a big area where explosion proof or ATEX stuff is required because of the alcohol content, right? Basically anywhere that an electrical spark could cause an explosion still applies in the sanitary space. Really not on the food side, but more when you're getting the alcohols and solvents. The CE mark is important for Europe. That's just more of in order for us to sell into Europe, all of our equipment has to be CE marked in order to kind of go in and be sold to that market. So we do that for all of our equipment, whether it's sanitary or industrial, to get into that space.
All right. I think that's all the questions I had. Do you have any final thoughts on certifications for sanitary and hygienic?
The one thing I will say is it always seems to be evolving, right? As people find out different things and learn different things, requirements change, certifications change, what people want changes. And we're very open to being on the front edge of that. So I would encourage any of our channel partners or customers or anything like that to let us know if they see anything new out there, right? We're always looking for feedback from the industry and what we need to do to make sure that pumps can go into certain spaces. So
what is the best way for our customers to learn about the certifications that we have and to get any paperwork that they may need?
The best way to learn about them is probably either go to graco.com or talk to our tech support, right? We have a great tech support in-house. Andy and Jeremy take care of most of that stuff. So they can either email processtech@graco.com or give them a call. The phone number is listed online. For a lot of the certifications like FDA and 3A, we send that certification paperwork with every pump that we build if they meet that standard, right? USP Class VI, 3A, FDA. And even 3.1, where it's specific to that pump, we send that certificate with. The one thing to note about 3.1 certification is you have to order that pump up front because it's specific for a pump. So pump, X-ray scan with it, we can't do it because you have the pump and we can't scan your pump, right? So make sure you understand up front what your application requires and then talk with our tech support or our business development managers and we can direct you to the right pump.
All right. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for taking some time with us today. Take a look at the description. We'll have some links to our certifications on the website, and we'll have links to our tech support as well. So thanks for your time today. We'll catch you on the next PumpCast. Bye.